on behalf of UKspace, I would like to thank ADS for the fantastic job they've done for us this year, hosting us in this zone, and the facilities they've provided. They really have done us proud. And so on to today's agenda. Today is all about growth, the space growth agenda. We all know the challenges that we face here in the UK and across Europe in the current economic climate. And we in the space community are firm believers that space is going to be one of the key sectors that's going to help us move the economy forward and move the country forward as we need to move all of us into a new way of developing economic growth. So that's what we believe, and we are also seeing that more people from outside the space arena are seeing the same story as us, and that's how we need to make that further engagement and continue to reach out to those wider communities. So we do have a great agenda. We have two directors from the European Space Agency speaking today, Magali Vassier and Volker Liebig. We have representatives from the UK Space Agency, and we also have Richard Peckham from industry, from Astrium, representing the industrial view and showing how we're actually going to work together and make this growth agenda, bring this growth agenda to life. But before we move on to all of that, I'd like to invite Stephen McPartland, MP for Stevenage, and member of the Parliamentary Space Committee, to give us his own thoughts and to set some context for the day before we ask Lord Green to make his keynote address. So thanks very much. Stephen, over to you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me. They popped me on a stage so that you could actually see me. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the welcome. Lord Green mentioned to me just as we started that the show opened with the Prime Minister, and it's been downhill ever since. I'm the warm-up act for Lord Green. He's going to speak to us and contribute with his vast knowledge of industry. He does have to be away quite quickly afterwards, so please excuse that. But I'd just like to take a couple of minutes, as they're giving me a microphone and there's a TV camera pointed at me, so I'm not moving for a few minutes. I just want to say how excited I am that we're here to celebrate the space industry. I'm very lucky that in my constituency of Stevenage we have Astrium, who employ over 1,500 people, and in my view build 25% of the world's telecommunication satellites. The space industry is a real tangible thing in my constituency, but it's great for the economy, it's great for industry, but it's great for young people, it's great for education. I have an aspirational industry sitting in the heart of my constituency that inspires young people to go off and be engineers, be technicians, go to university, become apprentices, wait for the fighter jet to finish. We also build a few bits that go on fighter jets as well, but we can't talk about that. But realistically, we've also had David Willett pop along to the space event this week. David is a massive champion of space, and he's made a number of very good speeches. He's really put space at the heart of the British attempt to rebalance the British economy, and space is seen as a high-value, high-sector industry that's going places. I'm delighted to be associated with it. I'm delighted to be considered to be one of the champions in Parliament for the space industry, and I very much look forward to working with you over the years to come. It gives me great pleasure to now introduce Lord Green, my colleague in Parliament.
Stephen, thank you very much. And one thing I can assure you of is that the blue Rolls Royce was not a government car. I am delighted to be here today. This is very clearly the must-attend international air show of the world, and I'm pleased with what has already been referred to by Graham, the fact that we have mobilised more government ministers to this year's event than to any previous one. That reflects the importance of the aerospace industry in general to the British economy, and of course being here and following in the footstep of David Willits reflects the importance of the space industry in particular. Stephen, thank you for those kind words of introduction. George Orwell said that a pessimist is a person who has more opportunities than an optimist to say, "I told you so." Well, the last few weeks have been good for optimists. For lovers of science, the discovery of the Higgs boson generated huge excitement. And some of you may have seen Professor Peter Higgs from Edinburgh University deeply emotional as he thanked the scientists who had spent decades working to prove his theory right. And this week at Farnborough has been good for anyone who ever aspired to be an astronaut, with Virgin Galactic's Spaceship Two and reaction engine Skylon spaceplane bringing this prospect closer and closer to reality. And for those who've always believed in the future of the UK space industry, figures this week show that it's stronger than ever, generating highly skilled jobs for the brightest and best of Britain's engineers. I've been asked to talk today about the challenge facing the space industry, and perhaps I ought to say I really want to talk about the challenge and the opportunity facing the space industry. Because in these difficult times for the economy overall, I spend a lot of my time talking about the overall economy and the need to rebalance away from consumption fueled by debt, which was the growth engine of this economy up to and including the financial crisis, and we must focus more on investment and more on trade as our sources of sustainable growth looking forwards. And it's in that broader context that the aerospace industry as a whole fits, as does the space industry in particular. It's my job to encourage British firms to look beyond the confines of the domestic market and international firms to come to the UK to achieve their global ambitions, because that way lies sustainable growth, job creation and the future for the next generation. Now, when it comes to the space industry, I don't need to tell you any of this because the space industry was sort of born global. And what's more, it automatically, by definition, aims high. This is an industry full of ambitions that naturally go beyond national boundaries. That's why I think that the challenge for the space industry is in some ways an earthbound one of just thinking about how we invest appropriately in it to ensure that we continue to grow at the rapid rate that the space industry is clearly capable of. Continuing to find ways of turning brilliant theory into relevant, useful, commercialisable applications and thereby foster economic growth. Now, if you're looking for examples of the linkage between theory and application, CERN is of course quite a good one and a very famous one. The discovery of the Higgs boson 50 years after the research was first published has changed science forever. But the process of making that discovery changed the world too, in that it was clearly dependent on the digital connection made possible by the internet. Similarly, the applications of space technology are increasingly pervasive. Our cars are directed by satellite navigation systems, and satellites enable us to speak to people around the world on mobile phones at ever-diminishing cost. The Olympic Games will be broadcast to the world's largest ever audience by space. Space technology will deliver broadband that will help farmers in remote areas of this country connect up to the economic mainstream of the international markets. And get this, tourists can plan their summer around weather forecasts that draw heavily on space data. I've just been given a very small gift by the two representatives of the ESA, which consists of a beautiful space satellite picture of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, with not a single cloud in sight. But this was built up modularly. I think you probably have to wait for 100 years to find an actual picture of the whole of the British Isles without a single cloud in sight. There are companies here today that provide all of those services. They're working in an industry which is worth just over £9 billion to the British economy in 2010-11, and directly employs nearly 30,000 people. Globally, the space sector is forecast to more than double to £400 billion per annum in real terms by 2030, and our ambition is to capture 10% of that market. If that's aiming high, it is absolutely not aiming ridiculously high. This is our aspiration, and we really should work out how we can achieve that. In this, the European Space Agency has got a key role to play, and I'm very pleased that we have the two directors here this morning, Magane Vessier and Professor Volker Liebing, who, as I say, very kindly gave me that cloudless and beautiful picture of the British Isles just now. We have Avanti Communications, a rapidly growing start-up that's supplying broadband to European customers, a prime example of where government, the ESA and industry can work together. An award of £40 million by ESA de-risks Avanti's first satellite, HILAS-1, to the point that the company could raise the 80 million needed to launch the satellite and establish itself as a space company. Avanti sourced the financing for its second satellite, HILAS-2, itself. This satellite launches next month. And they're now collaborating with ESA, raising an £80 million to supply their payload, HILAS-3, for a new ESA platform. This is a good example of the sort of virtuous growth, virtuous cycle that will drive huge growth in this industry. That was originally an SME startup. Looking forward, we need to see more businesses like Avanti entering the market, particularly service businesses and businesses that can develop applications for space data. We need more investment in the UK's existing high-growth business. Companies already working in the space industry need to look at other industries to see where they can offer effective, cost-effective, efficient solutions. And in addition to looking at the export opportunities, the UK needs to encourage inward investment by international firms into our burgeoning industry. We can't rest on our laurels, as you all know. This is a very competitive marketplace, but it is one where we have the world-leading competencies to do well. That's why the government is taking action to support the industry. David Willits, as you know, is on the case. The UKspace Agency has been set up to pull together all of the strands of space activity across government into one place with responsibility for the civil space strategy. There's a regulatory reform package for the sector underway. The UK Space Agency is now running a public consultation as one of the final steps towards reforming the Outer Space Act to cap third-party liabilities on UK satellite operators. And we all know that that's a pretty important change for the UK industry. We've worked with industry to improve access to orbit slots for UK operators with a good outcome from the World Radio Conference in Geneva. We're helping to advise businesses on when they need export licenses. We're working with the Department for Transport to understand the options for creating a safety regulatory environment for space tourism and to certificate space planes and all new space infrastructure which has the potential to dramatically reduce the price of launching satellites compared with the traditional rocket launchers. Space applications will also be the focus of one of the government's new catapult centres aimed at commercialising space technologies. And in addition to all of this, Surrey Satellite Technology Limited is receiving £21 million to jointly research and demonstrate a new UK space radar capability called NOVASAR. Its aim is to make a system that works at all hours and in all weather and will be more affordable than other radar systems. I want to wrap up now so that we can get on to the discussion of the issues that you face, but I'm really delighted to be here today. This is a really important sector of a really important sector of the British economy. It's a very high quality sector with high growth, high quality jobs created. It isn't furiously internationally competitive. We cannot rest on our laurels, but I think we have a very good starting base, and I promise you, you have very active government support, government in general, and I know since David Willis is a close colleague of mine how passionately he cares about this business and how very focused he is on the issues that we need to address to permit it to succeed. Thank you for being here. Bear with me if I move on. I've been given a very packed agenda today, but I promise you it was not my blue Rolls Royce that was holding up the proceedings. Thank you.
All right, so good morning to everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. And actually I have to say that I appreciated very much the speech of Lord Green and the one of Catherine. So I will try to complement what Catherine has introduced to you, but with some more specific facts related to the European Space Agency. First, I would like to say that we are all proud in Europe about the successes of the European space sector. Why? Because in particular, the European SATCOM market share has in reality grown up from 19% in the 90s to to 35% in average in the last 5 years, a huge growth in terms of performances on the world market. And of course, we can also be proud of all the scientific firsts, like the one of Herschel Planck, and of the numerous programs of ESA, and also of the national space agencies. But at the same time, as Lord Green said, we cannot just stand still, we cannot just rest on our laurels, because of the rapidly changing economic environment in which we are all operating. We have to move forward, adapt for more constrained public funding, face fiercer competition. For that, Europe needs to innovate, to deliver more value for less money. So talking about the specific case of UK, ESA recognizes this country as a major player in the space domain and as a strong and valuable partner in ESA. UK has been and remains a driver for change. As a matter of fact, as Lord Green already mentioned, the first large public-private partnerships have been initiated by ESA in UK. The very first one was HILAS-1 with Avanti Communications, and this satellite is now embarking quite an innovative payload and is beautifully performing in orbit at the satisfaction of a growing number of broadband communication users. Then we have another prominent case with AlphaSat, which is being developed in partnership with Inmarsat, another UK company, and that will be launched next year. Indeed, these partnerships have allowed ESA to also establish long-standing business relationships with these British operators. So that 2 days ago, we signed a new contract with Avanti, allowing to host their HILAS-3 mission on board an ESA satellite currently under development within the EDRS program. ESA has developed in the last years this capability to set up partnerships with private entities, private companies, to develop new technologies, new satellites, and even new solutions and applications in response to users' demand. And yes, indeed, UK has been instrumental in the development of this capability. Another important step forward we've made in UK is worth mentioning. We have established in Harwell what we can call an ambassador platform to raise awareness in the non-space sectors about what space can bring. And we are bringing in Harwell also some business development capabilities in addition to an incubator for startup companies. Now, talking about the future, I would like to show you that indeed ESA priorities are well aligned with the UK strategy. Let me first mention that in the Agenda 2015 that our Director General has produced and which gives the main strategic guidelines for our new programs, these programs aim at three main priorities. First is aim at pushing knowledge, and I'm sure my colleague Volker will talk about this in depth. Other programs should aim at developing new services, and the third category of programs should aim at supporting industry competitiveness and economic growth. Now, indeed, in very concrete terms, I would like to briefly touch upon these proposals we are preparing for the Council at ministerial level of November, which actually support the competitiveness of industry on the world market. So within the ARTES program, we propose to extend the core ARTES elements which allow to develop technology and products R&D. We propose to initiate the development of the next generation platform which will address the bulk of the SATCOM market with the ambition for the European industry to capture 50% of the market. Lord Green has mentioned that he has the ambition for UK industry to capture 10%, but Europe-wide, the ambition is to capture 50% of the market, including, of course, a share for UK. We are also proposing to set up new public-private partnerships and under the initiative of industry. The other set of our proposals under the ARTES framework aims at developing new services to boost the economy. There is the second phase of the Integrated Applications Promotion Program that we are pushing forward. There is the IRIS program, which aims at providing SATCOM, aeronautical communication services, with a very pragmatic introduction of precursor services taking benefit of the existing infrastructure of Inmarsat. There is the Satellite AIS program, which will provide services for maritime surveillance. And eventually there is the GlobeNet program, which will complement the EDRS program to provide world relay services. And finally, let me insist once again on the need for ESA and UK to further develop their coordination and their cooperation. We do welcome all UK government initiatives that support space investments in the context of the innovation and growth strategy. And indeed, the recent announcement of the space catapult is very good news. And ESA will seek and seize all opportunities to get involved in this initiative. And in addition, of course, ESA will keep on developing its presence and involvement in HAWEB. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much to Catherine and Magali there for so eloquently outlining the ambition that we're setting ourselves in this sector. I'd like to invite our next speakers, Volker Liebig and Keith Robson, to come to the podium. Volker and Keith are going to talk about now the knowledge base and the expertise that we have here in Europe that's actually going to set the platform now for us being able to achieve that ambition. So if I could invite, first of all, Volker, I think you're going to start?
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, this one, start.
Yeah, good morning everybody. It's a pleasure for me to speak here, and this part comes under knowledge, and the question how knowledge creates growth. And so we have chosen some examples from Earth observation, how science and knowledge has been transferred in new applications, because at the beginning of growth is innovation, and much of this innovation starts just by science without having already a product in mind. We should also see that. We cannot know at the beginning of all research we do in science what is finally the product. It's a good mix of, I think, the different approaches. So we have chosen 4 examples: cryosat, radar interferometry, carbon monitoring, and weather forecasting, to give you a view on some examples. We could have chosen many others because we have hundreds of applications in the Earth Observation Envelope program, which is prepared. And we are already building 2 big infrastructures, as you know, since more than 30 years, the meteorological infrastructure, and since a couple of years, the GMES infrastructure for environment and security, which will be the first worldwide for these purposes. So Cryosat is a very innovative mission, the first ever synthetic aperture altimeter in space. It is a small satellite. Some of you might have seen a satellite model already in 1-to-1, so it's not a big satellite. It is led scientifically from UK, University College London. Duncan Wingham was our lead scientist, and he delivered a lot of ideas. And what we do with this satellite is the first routine measurements of sea ice thickness, and it has delivered a step function in the improvement of our knowledge about what's happening in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic, as there are dramatic changes ongoing. I should also mention that the combination of the Cryosat ice measurements with the gravity measurements we get from GOGI help us to calculate for the first time, without any buoy in situ measurements, ocean currents, which is an information which was so far not available. So here you see a map of the Arctic as we have presented it recently. We had an event after 1 year of measurements to show for the first time the multi-seasonal development of sea ice thickness in the Arctic, together with Minister Willets here in London. And we can see that the Arctic sea ice is reduced drastically compared to earlier years. So one can measure that we have more or less 12% per decade reduction since the late 70s. And this is an extension, but now for the first time we can also measure the ice thickness. And why is this important? Before I come to that, I would like to also show you what has been forecasted. In the left lower corner you see what the last International Panel for Climate Change report has forecasted in terms of the ice retreat, and the red curve is what we measure. So you see it's going much faster than expected, the retreat of the Arctic ice, and by that of course also the reflectivity of Earth changes very much. This has a climate change impact, absolutely. This has an ecological impact in the Arctic region, but it has also a geopolitical and economic impact, because the Arctic region is economically very interesting. Some information on that you find in the right upper chart. So about 15 to 20% of the hydrocarbons of this planet are expected in the Arctic. Mineral mining has already started, fishery is picking up, tourism is picking up, and there's another aspect which is that the sea routes from European market to Asian markets are much shorter via the eastern or northwestern sea passage over the Arctic. The first cargo ships have already tried, guided by ESA radar satellites through the ice, so they made it already in the summer period and showed that this is possible, but it will improve every year now, the situation for that. Another example I would like to give you is radar interferometry. I have to say, when the first radar went into space, it was with the first European radar with ERS-1, more than 20 years ago. Nobody really thought of SAR interferometry and that this would become really what I would call a killer application. Nowadays we see many applications blooming up of commercial services, for mining, for oil and gas industry, for civil engineering, for transport, insurance, and many others. And I will give you a little insight in that. So here you see a couple of products coming from SAR interferometry. For those who are not familiar with that, what you can measure with interferometry from space radars is ground displacements in the order of millimeters per year. And what you see if you start at the left upper side is, for example, landslides. We can measure points on the Earth and their movements. This is an example from Italy. On the right upper corner you see the Barcelona airport, but one can make the same measurements on many airports, where you see that the landing strip has moved a bit, so it is now some centimeters in these yellow areas lower than it was when it was built. So this is of course very important information, especially over the years. In the left lower corner you see the Dutch dams. They are sinking in some areas. The color code goes up to, and this is the orange part, 7 millimeter per year subsidence. And you can do the same on buildings. I show you here a dome, Santa Maria Salute in Venice, which with the so-called permanent scattering methodology, we can measure every year how these buildings move. The same can be done for volcanoes and many other applications. So here a real plethora of applications has developed from one methodology. Another interesting example, which looks maybe also in the future, is carbon storage. Here you see an example. This is taken from a German application where an oil and gas supplier has made first tests in storing CO2 in the subsurface, and the red curve you see, this is how the surface reacts to the filling in of CO2 gas in the subsurface. This brings me to weather forecasting, and we depend heavily in our weather forecast on satellites. A system like METOP, and we are just preparing the second generation of this satellite, contributes 40% to the accuracy of the weather forecast, and the macroeconomic impact of that is high. There was an estimate that METOP second generation alone will contribute, it will bring an economic benefit between 16 and 63 billion euros over the lifetime of this satellite system. And what has changed, you can see in the upper left graph. So today, the 7-day forecast, and this is data of ECMWF, is more accurate than in the 80s, the 5-day forecast, and at the beginning of the satellite-based weather forecast, even the 3-day forecast. So also the nowcasting, which is something we use when storms are appearing, and not only hurricanes as shown here, but also huge storms in Europe. The accuracy of the forecast has improved very much, and this has a direct economic impact on our societies. So the last example I would like to show is carbon stock management. Over the economic discussion we have at the moment due to the economic crisis worldwide, we have lost a bit out of sight that the biggest challenge of the 21st century is still climate change, also in terms of economy. The Elias review, which was done for the UK Prime Minister, estimated the global economic cost of only the impact of deforestation, which comes also by human behavior but also by climate change, will rise to a value of around 1 trillion a year by 2100. And if we want to halve the emissions via carbon trading, we have a sum of 33 billion to mobilize. So these are very important figures. There is activities underway to do that, to support all this, and satellites play a crucial role because we don't know exactly the sinks and the sources of carbon worldwide. And if we can reduce the uncertainty by 10%, this represents also an economic value of $2 billion per year. So ESA is working together with other international space agencies on solutions for that. How can we improve our knowledge about carbon? One is to measure the CO2 column in our atmosphere. Another is to measure the biomass which is contained in the forests. And for that, as I said, we have a couple of missions already in the making. And here you see one example which comes out of the Earth Observation Envelope program, in which we have an exploitation part, in which we develop pilot applications. And this is a forest map of Western Siberia, which is the area with the most boreal forests. If we think about forests, we should not only think of tropical rainforests, but also of boreal forests. And you see here also in a color code where you have deforestation and where you have reforestation, and to have then also models how much carbon this represents. This is what we are preparing today, and what is also harmonized internationally, because this shall lead also to a regime in which you can support then carbon trading and the monitoring of this. So these were just some examples which gave you an idea how scientific achievements, innovation, technological innovations are converted into products, and therefore also growth in areas where you can expect also markets, so partly governmental markets, but I think nothing is wrong with that. And this brings me to my last slide. Of course, I have also to mention that this year is a very important year for European space. It has already been said by Magali and by others. We have our ministerial conference, and from Earth observation, we have 3 proposals there. The first, and for me the most important, is the Earth Observation Envelope program, because it is the mother or the father of everything. All these applications are developed in the context of this program. All the technologies which go later in operational program proposals, like the second generation of METOP or GMAS, which you also find here, start in the technology program of EOEP, and who wants to be later in the operational system has to start first also in the Earth Observation Envelope program. I hope this has given you an idea how knowledge creates growth also in space, and I thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much to Volker and Keith, and I hope that you took from that a real clear sense of the strength of the foundations and the strength of the knowledge base that we're building on now as we move our ambition forward and as we seek to grow this sector. Our final speaker today is Richard Peckham. Richard Peckham's from Astrium, and he's going to now try and outline where the real opportunities are and where the UK is really going to place its bets in the years to come. So, thank you very much, Richard.
Stuart, thank you very much. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So the opportunity. So first of all, I would say the opportunity is in the global market, because the global market is actually doing very well. The chart here shows results from the Space Foundation 2012 report, and it showed that in 2011 there was over a 12% growth in the market. Interestingly, US government continues to decrease as a percentage of that total. Rest of the world is going up a little bit as a percentage of that total, and that's probably not Europe, not the US. So we're on doing what we do today. If we can keep the same market share, we'd hit at about 25 billion. So it shows that we've really got to do better. So we have to get that 10%, we've got to do something different and do a little bit more. And of course, other nations are not idle. You know, other people have spotted what we spotted. You know, it's not rocket science, what it is, but you know what I mean. So other people have seen the growth markets, and even China, which perhaps was focusing particularly on big infrastructure and prestige programs, even the language from China is now more about kind of the applications and where the growth markets are. And I saw Russia recently issued a target saying that they are now targeting 10% of the world market. So the competition's on. So we've got a race to win. So the opportunity, where is it? It's where are the markets? And this again was a chart that we produced at the IGS time. It's nice to see up a little black arrow there, which shows the latest actual figures, and we're actually on the curve that I produced 2 years ago, so that's quite gratifying. So we're now 9.1 billion, and we were 7.5 when we did the IGS. So that's the chart. I mean, it's not very scientific, but I think the markets, we would all agree on where the growth markets are. So it's going to be in telecommunications, in broadcasting, in Earth observation services, so broadband, mobile. I think there's a lot of work in the security, which is across kind of all domains. So going for growth, so what do we need to do? So we need to focus on those high growth markets, and that's both in terms of the sectors, the telecoms, the navigation, position, time, Earth observation, and also, of course, the regions. Where is the growth? Clearly the Far East, Central America, Middle East, Africa. We need to recognise that most of the growth is in the application side, and I think we mustn't forget that. So that's where the growth is. So we need to focus on those applications and what we call the downstream. But I think importantly, don't forget the infrastructure that underpins that, because a lot of tomorrow's applications will be not on infrastructure that exists today, but on infrastructure that will exist tomorrow. So getting that cycle, and that's obviously one of the things we're trying to do with the Catapult and with ISIC, it's that cycle, what's the new technology that will trigger the next big, the big downstream. And I always come back to GPS. I mean, what a fantastic technology. So there's a space infrastructure that's just spawned this massive downstream. So, if you can come up with what's the next thing that's going to be on everybody's smartphone, that's the sort of thing that we need to be going for. We need to harmonise, and by harmonise, make sure they're all going in the same direction. Investments, so ESA, EU, national investments, private sector investments. How do we get those pulling together? You've heard from Keith earlier, we need to leverage that research base. There's a lot of really good research. How do we leverage that in to these growth markets? And you heard from Lord Green, export, that's the other thing. We've got to increase exports, go for those high growth markets. So, next opportunity, leveraging ESA. So you've heard a lot from ESA. Most of the UK government's investment in space is through ESA, and that's going to continue, I think. It's not about to change. So we've really got to maximise what we can do with ESA and the results that we get from ESA. We've heard from Volker Liebig that the science results are excellent from ESA, and we get 100% of the results, and we only have to contribute something like 17% of the cost. So that's a great return on investment anyway in terms of the science return. We've heard that ESA is changing, and I think you've heard the language, it's different from ESA. They know the economic environment too. They're looking at what they can do to reduce their cost, to be more efficient, to be more growth focused, and I think that's really good, and we should take the benefit of that. So certainly from the industry side, we will be pushing our government to make strong investments in ESA still, but to be targeted, to look at where's the high growth, and to maximise that return on investment. You've heard quite a lot about the PPP. ESA can do such a lot to kind of take out risk, to give its credibility to programmes, and maybe we'll have some EO PPPs in a few years' time, because we really do see EO becoming a more commercial market, and I think there's some excellent examples from Volker earlier of things that they start off as science, but there's so many applications that can come out of that. And I think, industry has shown it's ready with the examples that Magali gave, so things like Hireless, Alphasat. UK industry is ready to co-invest, and we're ready to work with governments and with ESA. And the other player, of course, is the European Union, and we mustn't forget the EU. So the EU is becoming a bigger player. Galileo, EGNOS, the big programmes, where the UK has played a big part, and we've done very well from that. GMES is obviously the next big thing. We're hoping that EU don't trip up on that and don't fund it, because EU is customer and keeping the operations and that continuity of data, because if you want applications to come, there's got to be that confidence that it's going to be there forever. So like Galileo, once you've got the confidence that the system's going to be there for the next 20 years, that's what's going to unlock the private investment to start developing the applications. If it's here today, gone tomorrow, why invest? Certainly I would urge, UK industry would urge, that we really want the EU, ESA member states to be working together, not competing, making the most of their investments so that we're all going in the same direction. So Horizon 2020 we're watching very closely, GMES we're watching very closely. So, the UK doing things differently. I think, well, Magali said that, you know, we are a little bit different here, so, you know, that can be good and bad. I'm sure that's probably quite frustrating to Easter sometimes, some of these kind of differences. So what have we done differently? And I think, you know, one of the things where we have shown that we can be a bit different was really the working together that was demonstrated by the IGS. And I do hear a lot of conflict in some other countries where, let's say government institutions and agencies perhaps don't always see eye to eye with industry or with academia. So I think the fact that we have managed to pull together with the IGS, that's continuing with the Catapult, where the government, departments, the industry and the academic community are really working together and pulling together in the same direction. So I think that's a very positive thing. I think the ISIC is something different. So we've seen, you know, kind of a different way of doing things, some new facilities, new capabilities, and the Catapult will now come and complement that. So there's again assured funding through the Catapult, the Technology Strategy Board, TSB, committing £10 million per year for at least 5 years, and I'm sure that will continue. And you know, we hope more money in time. So it's up to us to make a good business case. It's up to the private sector to come and share in that and invest as well, and to put research work through there. And I think it's great to see the new emphasis on export that you heard from Lord Green, and from the Prime Minister downwards. You know, ministers are going out there now with a much more positive attitude, bringing industry with them and supporting exports, and that's really great to see. Now, one of the other things I think we are good at in the UK, but we haven't made enough of it. You know, in the City of London, which I know gets bad press, but we've got insurance expertise, we've got legal expertise, and we've got finance and banking expertise. So we've got kind of the package deal. I think we need to do more on innovative finance and unlocking this finance. I was quite impressed at the Virgin launch yesterday. 3 startup companies, US startup companies, stood up with their new plans, and they've raised 100 million from private investors for a new Earth observation application. So using low-cost launch, they think they've now got a new business, and we need more of those. Significant people who are putting 100 million pounds, and we've got that confidence in their new business idea, to launch new opportunities. So in conclusion, the industry continues to believe in our target, although if anything I'm saying maybe that's now pessimistic, because the global market, we were assuming the global market was going to grow at 6% per year when we came up with the target. Well, at the moment it seems to be double that, so probably that's conservative. So we do need to keep looking at that, and we will keep looking at that. The IGS delivered a lot, but we've got to, as you've heard, we're going to rejuvenate, we've got to keep looking what's the next thing that we need to do. So we're on track, but we need to accelerate, we need to do more. We need to maximise the return on investment from all sources, from ESA, from the EU, from national, and we need to carry on kind of doing things differently. I think let's try and be innovative, let's think of new ways of doing things. Richard Branson finished yesterday by saying space was virgin territory, which was a pretty cool line. But in fact, I think space lost its virginity some time ago, so I think we all can go out there now and make the most of it. So thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning I said I was going to listen, so they decided to set me a little test, which was to do a roundup. So now I have to round up the speakers and prove I listened. So firstly we start off with Graham Chisnell. I'd like to thank him for starting the conference and sharing his passion and enthusiasm for the industry. We then moved on to a great speech by Lord Green, who celebrated the industry and congratulated you for the amazing achievements you've already secured. He offered even more government support to work with the industry and issued a challenge for us to grow even faster our share of the global space economy. Then we had Catherine, a great speech from the UKspace agency. She accepted the challenge. She set out her own mission, which she chose to accept, to help us succeed, working proactively with industry and the government to create the best regulatory framework for growth. Then Magali from ESA welcomed the UK's ambition to capture 10% of the global market, but then set out her own ambition for Europe to capture 50% of the global market. She welcomed the announcement of the Space Catapult, and ESA continuing commitment to Harwell. We then had Volker from ESA, and he outlined some of the many exciting examples of breakthroughs in technology in Earth observation, which has led to many opportunities to transform knowledge into growth, particularly cryosat, radar interferometry, which I hope I said correctly, and carbon monitoring. We then moved on to Keith, who had the great job of speaking on behalf of the UK academic community. He discussed the excitement being generated from the satellite applications catapult, the focus it has helped all groups involved in our sector. It's led to the creation of 4 priority markets: traffic management, natural resource management, disaster prevention and relief, security and civil protection. Then we finished with Richard, speaking on behalf of the UK space industry. He outlined the opportunity. The global market is growing at 12%, with the commercial sector driving this growth, which is very important. The UK market has grown at 7.5% over the last 2 years, which shows how much momentum we have, or as our American colleagues would say, the big mojo, during these difficult economic times. He outlined industry and the government's aspiration to quadruple in size the market to £40 billion by 2030, and he established how the UK industry is identifying those growth markets and how they're going for growth, and I hope to be with you every step of the way and trying to support you as we go for that growth. I'd also like to thank my co-host Stuart for making the event run so smoothly. This is our first event co-hosting. We'll be auditioning for Eurovision next year. So thank you all very much for listening, and I'll hand back over to Stuart.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that excellent summary of this morning's conference. I shan't try to add to it, but I think we will agree that the contributions from all our speakers today have been excellent, and I really hope they have left you with a sense of the dynamism and the enthusiasm and the opportunity that we have here in the UK, really to make a significant space industry in the UK, and really to grab that 10% that we're looking for out of this very fast worldwide growing market. So with that, I think I'll just close and invite you all to thank our speakers for the excellent contributions they've made today.
Yeah.